Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello, everyone. This is Vanessa Hogle, your host for all things paranormal and supernatural. We are going to discuss something tonight that might seem a little scary, it might seem a little crazy, but I know if you've watched any type of paranormal shows on TV, I know you've heard it a lot. We're going to discuss demons. In fact, what we're going to discuss is evil entities versus angry spirits. And I thought this was important. I really did, because I think that it gets confused a lot. If I'm being very honest, I think it gets confused way more than it should. I want to start off first talking about angry spirits. We're going to get into the juicy stuff here in a minute, but let's discuss angry spirits. Now, that does not mean that the person is violent necessarily. It doesn't mean that they have any type of ill will or feel any ill will towards anyone that comes onto their land or in their home, wherever it may be that you're investigating. What it does mean is they still have a lot of the emotions that they had when they were living. They might have died during trauma. They might have died too soon. They might have died not being able to get those last messages out to people that they considered important to them. There could be any slew of reasons as to why they would hold on to any type of negative emotion. Now, what you need to know is when they have that emotion, when they have held on to that negativity, while it doesn't make them evil, it can make them more difficult to communicate with. It can make them, in some cases, and I have been subject to this, it can make them somewhat verbally abusive. It can. It can make them lash out in a physical sense, and not like somebody sitting next to you and popping you. Not like that. But in a way where they might throw something, or they might slam a door. Matter of fact, I can go ahead and give you a for instance here, because I love for instances. I was in Ireland not too long ago, and a very dear friend of mine, my co-founder with Perfect Trust Productions, we were at a place called Moore Hall. Now, this particular location has a very distinct vibe to it. It has a multi-layered history. It has seen much violence. It absolutely has. It's seen happy times, too, but it has seen much violence, and there has been much death there. Well, we are being as respectful as we can and just trying to document. We never look at it as evidence. We're trying to document. If we get something, that is wonderful. If we don't, that's okay, too. That's neither here nor there. But we had the opportunity to go there during the middle of the night, and we were filming, and a very strange thing happened. We are standing at the front of the building, very large, at least 4 stories tall, and to give you an idea of how big this was, we did have somebody with us for security, and he's about 6'3", and a big dude. Well, he had to do a makeshift ladder just so he could get his elbows on the windowsill of the first floor. That is how big this place is. And what he was doing as he was taking pictures with a regular camera, he sat his cell phone off and to the side. Well, whatever was there, he decided that cell phone needed to be turned on, have the flashlight turned on, thrown in a spinning motion off the windowsill. Now, granted, it was not aimed at any one of us. But what it was a sure sign that at that point in time, at that location, we were not necessarily welcome by that one particular spirit. What's interesting to know and what's important to remember is that's one spirit. That's one. You're talking about a place that has tens of dozens. So if we would have went by the standards shown on regular television right now, cable television, in regards to how different investigations are done, the first thing we should have done, throw our hands up, assume that we were not wanted there at all by everything, yell demon, and run. We did not do that. We actually continued to investigate for another 3.5, 4 hours in various areas of the property and got much documentation based on those efforts. And that was really the only, what I would consider negative, that happened the entire time we were there. In those instances, if I step back as somebody who, if I consider myself somebody who has not been in the paranormal as long as I have, and something like that happened, I can understand. I can understand how that would be perceived as something negative. I get it. As something that could be less than human, to take the amount of power it would take in order to turn on a cell phone, turn on the flashlight. That takes knowledge, by the way, dexterity and knowledge, unless it's just being used by the mind, which is also an option. And it also takes an extreme force of will to put the energy behind that in order to project it, what ended up being about 6 to 8 feet away from the building. That takes a lot of energy. So yes, I could understand how that could be perceived as something with a great amount of strength. I understand that. That having been said, and what I find disturbing is the immediate response that it must be inhuman, that it must be a demon. What I also find fascinating is we always assume, and the shows always assume, Christianity, demon, must be afraid, when that is not the case at all. There are what's called daemons. It's even spelled slightly differently, but has the same meaning for the most part. If you go back into Greek mythology, it's called a daemon, and it was considered a divine power, or a spirit or a divine power, and they were not negative. They were not negative at all. A simple change slightly in the pronunciation of the word, if you go to ancient Egypt and you look at that, and you look at the daemons or how they explained them back then, the lines between deities and daemons were smudged big time, because everything had its purpose. The deities had their purpose, the daemons had their purpose, or demons if you want to call them that. And a lot of times they work together, and that is something that a lot of people don't realize. They choose to look at it in solely Christian viewpoint, and that is simply dangerous to do, because you're talking about an entity that is not necessarily set in stone at one particular location in the world. You're talking about something that has never walked the earth as a human and has the free will to roam wherever it. So that is something to really consider when you're thinking about things like this. Demons were also, a lot of the lower level demons, what they call demons, were connected to deities as their underlings, as their servants, for lack of a better word. I'm using today's words for their standards back then. So it's really, if you're not certain what you're dealing with, one of the worst and most insulting things that you can do is to automatically assume that it is something that has such a negative vibe to it, something that, at least in your mind, is evil, when in fact that very well is more than likely not the case. When you're talking about going into a location and seeing things happen that defy explanation, even in the paranormal world, what you need to do is take yourself and your personal feelings and your religious beliefs, if at all possible, to a level that makes you comfortable, and take them completely away from the situation. Try to look at it, even if you're not, from a scientific viewpoint. You're not a scientist, I understand, I'm not either. But if you look at it from a scientific viewpoint, you have taken opinion out. So if you're at a location and something gets thrown at you, or you believe something has gotten thrown at you, look at it closer. Find out why. What did you say? What were the words that were said by you right before that happened? Is there anything else that could have contributed to that type of activity? Were there any other personal situations or experiences that happened at the same time, right before or directly after? What was your gut feeling before it happened? Because I'm here to tell y'all right now, people, I have been at least once in my life, and I'm 48 years old, so I've been doing this for about 46 years. I have been at least one time in my life in the direct presence of something that could be considered otherworldly, unholy, demonic. If I'm going to go ahead and throw the D word out there, and y'all know I don't like to do that, but if I'm going to do that, it has happened. I have had experience with that, and I can tell you, I can be very honest with you in the fact that it doesn't pop in without your, knowledge. It just doesn't. It doesn't happen. There are many things that lead up to that type of activity. And that's another thing that I think we probably should discuss. There's so many people that are willing to throw that word out there without realizing you have all these different clues before something like that happens that are letting you know, almost as a warning, really, if I'm being very honest with you, it's almost as a warning, hey, this is coming. You have the choice. You can either stay here and witness this situation, or you can go ahead and extract yourself from it and wonder, which is perfectly fine. When these things happen and you feel like you need to extract yourself, by all means, do it. There is no shame in putting your safety above an investigation. Matter of fact, I highly encourage it, and I wish I would have, okay? But this was in Virginia. Go ahead and give y'all another quick story just to kind of get your juices flowing on what I'm talking about here. I flew in from Oklahoma to Virginia to work on a case because it was imperative with the children that were involved in it that were being affected. And what I saw there after a few hours of being at this particular location, what I saw straddling the barn and how it was and how it projected itself to us. I mean, honestly, if I went the rest of my life never seeing this again, I would be totally okay. I ignored the warning signs. The rest of the team ignored the warning signs. And we learned our lesson gravely. We did. We ignored the insects. We ignored the smell of rotting meat. We ignored the stillness of the area, the lack of, and when I say insects, by the way, I mean crawling all over a table. It wasn't that they were flying in the air. Believe me, that wouldn't have bothered me. But looking like 100 pounds of them was dumped on a table, that's a little disconcerting. I don't care who you are. But we ignored the stillness of the air. We ignored the lack of animal sound. We ignored it all because our brain just didn't go there. It just didn't go there. And we learned the very hard way that those things do exist. When it comes to angry spirits, those were also present at this particular location. Not in that area, but in a different area. Now, it would be very easy for somebody to go in and assume that just because it was demonic in the barn, I'm going to go ahead and put it that way, just because it was demonic in the barn doesn't mean that it was demonic in the home. And that is something that you also need to pay very close attention to, okay? You can have layers of activity at the same location. You can have different beings at the same location, both human and those who have never walked the earth as human. You can have all of this at the same location in different areas, but never have them interact. They might not even know of each other's presence. It's all these little nuances that you have to look at when you're going into a place. It's all these little things that you have to be prepared for when you're going to a location, especially for the first time. And, first and foremost, you have to listen to your gut. What's it telling you? With those smells that we were smelling, with the piles of insects that we were dealing with. Like I said, the rotting meat, the stillness of the night, the interaction. That is the other thing. This is a crazy one. That darn thing that was straddling the top of a barn, that, by the way, spanned almost 20 feet, okay? That's how big this thing was. It was interacting with me. It was answering my questions. It was doing exactly what I asked it to do. And that is also, let me go ahead and tell you, a dead giveaway that it's not a human spirit. That is a dead giveaway. It takes an immense amount of energy for somebody who has passed on to be able to be able to do what it is that you need them to do in order to try to communicate. Any one of you who has ever been out investigating or tried to connect with a deceased loved one, you know what I'm saying is true. It's little signs that you get, little words that you get. It's those things that just seem to come from out of nowhere that kind of give you a hint that you have, a spirit communicating with you, right? This thing was so distinct and so loud and so, trying to give the best word I can for this, but almost mocking in its answers, that was, again, a dead giveaway, that it was not human. And then we had that pretty much confirmed when we heard it run across the top of the barn. Any human running across the barn, if there was anybody up there, you're going to hear 2 feet, right? That's just the way it is. We only have 2 feet. This was shaped like a spider with a human head, and its legs spanned, arms and legs spanned the top part of the barn. That's what we were able to see when we got outside and saw it. So when we heard the running, it was arms and legs, hands and feet at the same time. So again, dead giveaway. There's no way for me to know. There's no way for me to know if that would have been something that would have been considered a Christian demon. And that whole little phrase there sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? A Christian demon. But in fact, considering that daemons or other versions of demons predate Christianity by thousands of years, I find it fascinating that they all have such a similar name, but there is no way for me to know where it came from. I have my beliefs. I do have my beliefs. There was a large congregation of Haitian slaves that had resided on this property. And matter of fact, I had channeled one of them, and it wasn't good, necessarily for me, but I had channeled one of them, and I do believe that they were part of what it summoned. So that is another area that you can go down when you're looking at something like that. Was it summoned here to get back at the people who had brought the slaves? Was it summoned here for another reason? Did they accidentally kick open a door that they were not aware of kicking open, and it came through? But there's no way to know. There's no way to know exactly where it came from, who would have been, what, if you don't mind me using the word master or deity, who would it have served? There's no way for me to know. But there are just the little giveaways that let you know it wasn't human. And that is the other thing. That's another thing to consider, angry ghosts. Eventually, if you're polite, let's just face it, don't be mean. If you're polite, if you try to communicate with them properly, if you're patient and you show kindness, they will eventually calm down, trust you enough, and start to speak with you. It isn't always going to be what you want to hear, okay? And that's something that you just need to be okay with. I mean, they are still people. They still have their opinions. They still have their likes and dislikes, even if they're not in, what I call corporal form, Sometimes they want to speak to somebody else. Gwen and I have been on many investigations where spirits would speak to me, but not her, or her and not me, and that's okay. It's all a matter of finding who you vibe with. and there's no reason to be offended by that or get your feelings hurt. But if it's an angry spirit over something like that, you can eventually, through a building of trust and through common courtesy, break down that wall and try to learn more about them and whatever it is that they need you to help them do so that they can find some peace. Now, keep in mind, I don't mean that you need to focus solely on helping them cross over, okay? I could do a whole show on that, helping them cross over. It has been my experience in the many, many moons that I have done this, that it is a two-way street. Whether they cross over or not, they can come and go as they see fit. Some choose to, some choose not to. Some can cross over and then come back 25 years later as if nothing ever happened. You know, it really does depend on them, all right? So I want you to take that needing to help them move on out of the equation. Focus solely on trying to find out why they feel the way that they do. Is there anything else you can do to help? If they ask you to help with that, that is perfectly fine. By all means, do it. Just show respect. But keep in mind, that is for the human ones. For the other ones, when you have all these instances, all these different things that show you that it is more, I don't want to say educated because that is not the case. But when it doesn't seem to struggle in order to communicate, that's a pretty good giveaway. That's a pretty good giveaway. And when the intelligence that is shown is above average, that is also another giveaway. And that is not to put down anybody who has passed. It's just when you have spent thousands of years, you know, on this earth, out there in the heavens, wherever it is that you know you're talking about, you acquire a certain level of knowledge. So that is not meant to offend. That is just fact. So that is something to consider. Multiple languages is something to consider, especially if you're talking about something that is, you know, a language that's more archaic, you know, or seems to be something from long, long, long ago. And that is another thing. That's something that people really do need to look into is when they get some of these EVPs. They need to look at, you know, and this goes both ways. If I am in a castle in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, not in Northern Ireland where it's primarily British, but at least the speaking is. But if I'm in Republic of Ireland and I'm in a castle and I'm getting communication that is talking about things that are, you know, many, many, many moons ago, and there's not an accent or at least some Gaelic thrown in there, I'm going to question it. That's just common sense, okay? So that is another thing to think about when you're on these investigations and whether or not it is evil entity or entity without being evil or human person who has passed, angry ghost. It's really complicated, folks. It really is, and we want to believe that it's easy because that's what TV shows us. We want to believe that you can go to any location and whip out an EVP recorder and a camera, and, buddy, you are set. You're set. You have got this. You can do it all, and you're going to have amazing confirmation and all this evidence to show everybody, and you're going to be the next. Fact of the matter is that nothing could be further from the truth. You could go to a location 20 times, get nothing, and on that 21st time, hit gold. Fact. But you got to be willing to go those 20 times to hit that 21st time. You have to be willing to put in the time. You have to be willing to talk to the angry ghost. You have to be willing to acknowledge that there are evil entities. All these little things that make up the very large lesson that is out there to be learned. And I hope that I can kind of help take you on that journey and learning it through my own little fun and quirky way. It is true. It's not always going to be, I don't sound like a Harvard professor is what I'm saying. But I hope you have fun. I hope I can educate you on what I know. And I hope to see you back here for the next show. So until then, you guys have a great night, day, afternoon, or weekend, wherever it is that you are. This is Vanessa. Talk to you later.